I'm going to start with the Denver Nuggets, they made the conference finals, obviously, lost to the Lakers after famously upsetting the Nuggets. They had one of our favorite players from the Ballboard podcast, Jamal Murray, step up big this playoffs.
He was amazing. He was incredible.
We're gonna ask a few questions for each team. First of all, what is this team? And it's pretty clearly that this team is a championship contender. They are in a win now moment, and I think they have a somewhat decent window to get it done. They're not like one of those teams that's, they have to win in the next year or two, but I think they've got a good few years to put some pieces together, have some internal growth going. But definitely their season success will be based on whether or not they A, get to the finals, and two, win the championship. What are your thoughts on these Nuggets?
Yeah, I think I totally agree. It's obviously they're a contender now, so they might as well try and make some moves to keep competing. But their window, they've got a big window. I mean, both their star players are very young. You got Nikola Jokic and Jamal Murray, who are both of them under the age of 24. So, and they also have big contracts. So Jokic is still locked down till 2023, and Jamal signed that big extension. So he's still on his 5-year deal. So they'll expire in the 25 season. So they're totally locked in, and really young. And then you got Michael Porter Jr., who's also there till 21 to 22 season. So still 2 more years on that rookie scale contract, which is really, for what he did in the bubble, it looks pretty kind of money efficient there. So, which means they've got some potential to try and make some moves. So,
yeah, 100%. Like Jamal Murray's 23. He's 23 this year. Jokic is 25, turning 26 next year. Both born in February, by the way. 4 days apart. There you go. Just learnt that. But so they're a young team. They've got a 5-year window, I would say, 5 or 6 year window that they can be good for a long time. I like their system. I like the way they play. They're emphasizing ball movement. And I think that's Jokic's imprints on the game. They do have some older pieces in players like Paul Millsap. He's probably the biggest guy that comes to mind, and a couple other younger guys. Will Barton has been a bit of a question mark. He's 29, so getting close to that 30 age where players start to decline. But otherwise, all their main pieces are pretty young. Do you think they need to go out and make a move to be the proper contender moving forward?
Well, I guess if we look at the players expiring now, so you got Paul Millsap expiring, you got Mason Plumlee expiring, and they played pretty big roles in that team. I mean, Paul Millsap was a starter, and Plumlee was the center off the bench. He put in a good 15 minutes a game, even in the playoffs. So, and then on top of that, you also have Jeremy Grant, who actually came out in the bubble. He was looking really well, and he's got a player option. So it's up to him if he wants to accept that or not. So if he declines, who knows what the outcome of that could be. So in terms of those 3 players, I'd say I actually quite like Plumlee because I think he's similar to Jokic in terms of a passing big. So if you want to run the similar plays for your bench, from a coaching perspective, I think that works. And he's athletic, he's mobile, he can do... I think the contract he's on now is a bit expensive, so if they can get him at a good price, there's no harm in re-signing him. And then I personally would also really want to re-sign Jeremy Grant because he's still pretty young as well. He's athletic, and as I said, he did really well in the playoffs. Paul Millsap, I think, is the expendable one there. If you're not going to get him on a good kind of low-level kind of veteran contract, I'd just be looking somewhere else.
Yeah, 100% agree with you. I think $30 million off your books from Paul Millsap is huge, and I think that's actually going to free up a lot of space for these guys. Mason Plumlee, again, $14 million for him. That's $44 million off your books of players who are not really contributing compared to some of these other guys. Jeremy Grant is an interesting one. I think that he will opt out. I feel like especially this off-season when there's not that many good free agents, he is someone that showed a bit of promise in the playoffs. His 3-point shooting is looking a lot better. I think he shot close to 40% in the playoffs, and we know that he's got that athleticism and shot blocking ability. So, but he would be a good fit next to Jokic. They need that rim protection that Jokic doesn't provide to be next to him, but still someone who can space the floor. So if Jeremy Grant can fill that role and continue to show improvement in that 3-point shot, I think it's a really good pairing to have those two together. And I think during the regular season, Paul Millsap was starting, so they could grow more with having Grant as their starting four. But I don't see like the only question mark for me is Gary Harris, really. And if Gary Harris can be, 2 years ago he was shooting ultra efficient, like 50%, nearly shooting 20 points per game, but injuries have sort of led him back. I'm not sure the kind of player he's going to be moving forward, and he's on that, close to $20 million a year. I don't know. Like, I feel like he needs to step up, and I've said it all along. Michael Porter Jr. is going to be taking that next leap, and I think if those two things happen, they on their day could compete with any team in the West. Really, I think they might have a hard time matchup wise versus the Lakers because I think Anthony Davis tears that team apart. They don't really have someone to throw at him. But outside of that, I can see them taking down any other team.
Yeah, I think it's critical to get Jeremy Grant back. The more I think about it, because they don't really have any reliable wing defender, because I feel like Gary Harris is a little bit limited with his size, and then usually what they were doing for a lot of playoff games, they'll bring in Torrey Craig, who I also will mention is expiring, so they'll have to try and re-sign him or go somewhere else. And he was he was guarding a lot of guards, and then he'd also guard the small forward on the odd occasion, just because they don't really have that kind of stopper. So I think they really have to get Jeremy Grant back, otherwise that's a huge hole. Because he is someone that actually did a okay job on Kawhi Leonard and did okay on LeBron. I mean, as good as you kind of can do. I mean, those players are exceptional. But, they could also probably use some assistance in the small forward position just to try and get some defense. I think offensively they're probably they're doing pretty well offensively. They had some good season stats. It's more the defense. So maybe they could bring a small forward or some kind of forward that come in as another defensive presence.
You've got a list of free agents up there at the moment. Is there anyone that catches your eye in terms of like a good defender that they can go out for and try and sign? I know this year's free agent pool isn't the most stellar, but is there someone?
Not great. It's really not great. You've got I look at Solomon Hill. I mean, off the bench, I guess Maurice Harkless. You go out and get a Jay Crowder potentially, but I think he's going to re-sign.
You think he'll re-sign with the Heat?
Yeah, exactly. So I think you're a bit limited there, unfortunately.
I think,
and that's why Grant really is. It's critical to try and get him back.
Yeah, I agree. I think he's going to be an underrated signing. I'm just really interested to see what kind of salary he commands and whether or not, like, first of all, if he opts out, and then if he does, what other teams are willing to pay for him, because I think he's the kind of player that actually is really valuable in today's NBA, like that long sort of wing/post defender that can switch out, cover bigs, cover wing players. So I do think he is quite valuable. Just whether or not the rest of the league, I know leagues up there, a lot of teams may be saving some salary cap for next year when there's a really big free agency class. So perhaps there maybe isn't that much money flying around this year. But who knows? Be interesting to see what he does there. They don't really seem to have any standout awful contracts on this team. I would say that if Gary Harris still plays as like bad as he has the last couple of years, that $19 million next year and $20 million the year after does start to look pretty awful. In saying that, though, there is a world that I see like him actually living up to that contract, but I think at this point it's probably looking less and less likely. But no other really bad contracts outside of that.
You do have, I'll point out maybe the Will Barton contract looks a bit bad as well. He's got the player option in the 21-22 season, and he's looking at $14 million over the next couple of seasons. So individually, so $14 mil. So it takes a bit of cap space out of your available for that that big 21 off season.
Yeah. And of course, their biggest asset, their centerpiece, we've talked about it before, Jamal Murray and Nikola Jokic. I do think that these two pieces can be like championship contending pieces. I just think that the surrounding cast needs to be fleshed out. It is probably tough to win with like a point guard center like build in today's NBA. So in saying that, like just getting a lot of interchangeable wings, good defenders, decent shooters, you can fill out that sort of position with semi-serviceable players. Like you were saying, like Solomon Hills, Jay Crowders, those guys, like they don't have to come in and drop 20 a game. They can just come in, hit open shots, defend the wing. And that's, I think with this team, that's sort of like all they're after. And I think if they can get some continued improvement from some of those young guys, I think that potentially could be enough to maybe make some noise in the West.
I'll flip a question at you. You did mention Jokic there. And I guess building a team around him. Would you say that he's up there as, if not the best passing center we've seen? He's only 25 years old, but I feel like he's in that discussion.
Are you talking like all time?
Just all time.
Yeah, look, geez. I guess, yeah, he's probably definitely up there. Off the top of my head, I'm thinking of probably less flashy passes, but someone like a Tim Duncan or a Kevin Garnett were pretty good in their day. But yeah, I'd say Jokic is probably a more complete passer than those guys. He's definitely more creative. Probably had some more highlight assists than some of those guys. Those guys are a bit more fundamental ball movers. So there's no one that clearly stands out to me that's ahead of him. What do you think?
I feel like look, maybe Bill Walton has a debate, but he kind of was derailed with injuries. But maybe you could throw Bill Walton. But why not? He won a championship with the Blazers.
Are you calling Larry Bird a big? Like, is Larry Bird a big man in today's NBA?
No, let's make it a center. Let's restrict it to center. See, he wasn't a center, so look, can you win with a passing big man? I mean, Bill Walton did it back in, was it the 70s? That's a while ago. So maybe
bit of a different league.
Yeah, maybe it's not super practical, but look, I think he's a top 10 player. With Jamal Murray, defensively, that's a bit of an issue, but if you get the right supporting cast around them, I don't see why they couldn't win. To be fair, the advanced stats actually suggest that Nikola Jokic is not a horrible defender. Now, he's not a good defender by any means, but he's just a very average defender. But it's just when you start to compare him to players like Anthony Davis and Joel Embiid, who are exceptional defenders at that position, the gap just seems enormous. So you just need to fill that defensive role in other positions to sort of allow yourself to be sort of acceptable on that end of the court. He had some really nice clutch stats as well in this postseason, so that's worth mentioning. And same with Jamal Murray. If you look at the best clutch field goals for players over the past 20 years, you had Jimmy Butler with the second best, so shout out to him. And you also had Jamal Murray as the fourth best clutch field goal over the last 20 years in the postseason. So that's how incredible he was. And it's good to see that they can perform when the stage is so big. Yeah, definitely. I'm going to throw one more question at you before we move on to the next team. In the next 5 years, do you see this team winning a championship? It's a tough question. I think they'll definitely be contenders for 5 years. Could they win one? They need to have the right cast around them. So they need the general manager to really make some moves, and they really need Michael Porter Jr. to kind of explode into an actual star. So if Michael Porter Jr. starts to step up defensively and matures into a star, I think they can. Wow. Okay. I'm gonna go no on that one. I don't think. Look, could I see a scenario where it does happen? Yes, I definitely could. Michael Porter Jr. could turn into an all-star level player. Jamal Murray could be the second coming of Steph Curry, and I could definitely see it happening. But I'm gonna hedge my bets and say that those things don't happen. I agree with you that they're going to be perennial contenders. They may even make an NBA Finals, but I don't see a way that this team's beating a team like the Lakers in the coming years, or even a team like some of the Eastern teams that are a bit younger, the Celtics, the Miami Heat. I think even if they meet those kind of teams in the finals, they would still be underdogs. But it could happen. I'm just going to hedge my bets and say probably not in the next 5 years.